In the last video, I did basic style sheets. We set up an actual style sheet file for all the CSS to be saved in, and then we did some basic CSS on the header up here. And we left it at the last bit where I showed you how you can adjust it within the CSS file here. So just coming back to the HTML file over here, and of course our website is in the top half of this particular view. Okay, or some of you may have side to side, that's fine as well. All right, so if you remember to click on a particular thing, rather than messing about trying to get hold of it, we can use this down here, which apparently is called a tag selector. So there we are, I've learned something. Okay, so I've got hold of the header here, and what we're going to do is we're going to put in a div. Now, div you're going to see throughout most websites. I don't want you to get hung up on what they are and what they mean and that kind of thing. It just means a division, and for you it could mean a box, whatever you want to call it. Some people call it containers, box, divs. Okay, so we're going to put a div around this header. Now, we could have a div that applied to the whole website. You could have divs all over the place. But if you get used to, just at the stage you're at, of having a div round a particular element within a website and then applying certain rules to that. Now, if I insert a div here by doing this, insert div, it's going to come up with 4 different versions of a div. Do you want a div before that, after that, wrap it around it, or nest it? Well, I want to actually wrap it around that. So know what it does. It sticks a div here, or the div tags before and afterwards. So it sticks a div round that particular header. All right. Now, as I said, we could leave that there and we could just go, right, we can organize that div with some CSS over here, and then everything that div applies to, those same rules are going to apply to everything else. But we want to do specific things at the moment with that header. Okay, what I actually want to do is I actually want to make sure it's in the center of the page and it doesn't expand out too far, and it's center aligned. Yeah, center of the page, as I just said, repeating myself as well. Okay, so I've got a div. At the moment, it's got no CSS applied to it whatsoever. So back to here, we're going in style sheet, we're going in global, and we're going to click plus. But this time, instead of leaving Dreamweaver to decide what to call it, we're going to say, no, we're going to actually create a new class. And if you create a new class, a specific class, you always want to call it dot. All right, and then we're going to later apply it to that particular div. We may apply it to other divs as well. Okay, so we're going to call this container. All right, and in container, we're going to do a maximum width. Now, the reason for doing a maximum width is, as I said, you want it to sit in the middle of the page, which this doesn't do. But what this does is, say you have somebody looking at it, viewing your website on a massive monitor, which somebody assessing your website may have, then you really don't want your header to go right across the page, especially if you've only got a small website with a few links or a hamburger menu, say for instance, on the right hand side. And then there'd be a massive gap between where your logo is and where those links are on the right hand side, and that'll look a bit odd. It'll just ruin your website. So in this bit here, we're going to look to do certain pixels of max width. We're going to look to do 1200. Now 1200 takes it beyond the 1024 resolution, and it's about standard to what people do nowadays. All right, so we've got 1200 pixels of maximum width. Of course, you're not going to know whether it works that unless you view it in something that's more than 1200 pixels. And the next thing we want to do is align this. Okay, so we're going to align this in the center, and we do this by clicking on PX here and going auto on the left, and also clicking on PX on the right and also going auto there as well. Okay, so that means it's going to automatically shift it left and right, so it's in the middle. All right, now if we look at the CSS now on this particular page, on this particular link, should I say, up here on your style sheet, it's got maximum width, left, auto, right, auto. So you can see that up there. And indeed, you could have coded that yourself. But nothing's actually happening, even though I save it, within here. Because this div at the moment, which is highlighted here and highlighted there, does not have this container applied to it. So if we click plus here and we put dot, and as there's only one, it's going to come up with it, and put dot container, suddenly this code changes to div class equals container. All right, so it's got a particular class applied to it from the CSS, which is all the things we've just put in there. So if I now click save here, and then I was to preview that website, as you can do, preview in browser, you will see that that particular header sits right in the middle of the page. But of course, as I just said, only if you're looking at your website on a browser that's going to go beyond 1200 are you going to actually see it within the middle of the page.